Hello, friends. Week 2 is in the books, and it's time for a game-by-game Week 2 recap. All the most notable fantasy football takeaways, the good, the bad, and the ugly from every single game, every team. What do we need to know? What's concerning? What's maybe okay, but we need to put a pin in and think about it a little bit later. And what are we most excited for from every single NFL team after 2 weeks in the 2025 NFL season? That's what we're going to get to today. Plus a little talk about the injury report. Sadly, few too many injuries for my liking, but we'll dive into those and then we'll go through all 16 games. Let's get to it. All right, guys, before we get into the game by game, all 16 games, let's do a quick injury report recap. Yes, there can be good as well as, of course, bad and ugly from the injury report. And we got a little bit of each section in week 2. Let's start with the good. Good news first. Xavier Worthy of the Chiefs, quote, looking good for week 3. Obviously did not play in week 2 in we'll get to it, the disastrous Chiefs-Eagles game, but Xavier Worthy looking good for week 3. Hopefully wheels up on some Chiefs after an 0-2 start. Xavier Worthy coming back for week 3. Tampa Bay Buccaneers obviously played some Monday Night Football last night. As of this recording, no Chris Godwin, no Tristan Wirfs. Chris Godwin still targeting something around a week 5 or so return. Obviously nothing super new there, but he is back and practicing, ramping himself up for a return to play. Probably even more notable for our purposes, if you drafted Tampa Bay Buccaneers, Tristan Wirfs, their superstar left tackle, is a huge deal. You know, we've seen historically splits from teams like the San Francisco 49ers with and without Trent Williams. I don't think Wirfs has been quite to that level, but we've seen the Bucs struggle a little bit, particularly in pass protection, run blocking, everything over the course of the first couple of weeks. 2 tough matchups with apparently a really good Falcons defense and the Houston Texans. But Tristan Wirfs hopefully coming back soon. He was not placed on injured reserve. He is practicing. So we'll see. Hopefully a Wirfs return soon will really help out our Buccaneers bags. The other, what I would call good news, we drafted a little bit over the summer. If you're in the best ball sicko landscape, Javonte Turpin, who turned out to be the wide receiver 3 for the Dallas Cowboys, actually caught 4 passes and a touchdown before he was injured in the week 2 game against the Giants. Had a neck issue and is reportedly okay and hopeful to play in week 3. So we avoided a major injury to Javonte Turpin, an ancillary player, but notable nonetheless. Let's get to the bad. There's a lot. Unfortunately, we're 2 weeks in. Obviously, this is ignoring the injuries that occurred in week 1, the Brock Purdy's and the George Kittles and such. But in week 2, we got the bad. Justin Fields, after a disastrous performance. I mean, the Jets were next level bad in that game. Fields was the lowest graded quarterback per PFF on the week 2 slate. And then he also suffered a concussion and did not return to that game. Aaron Glenn, Jets head coach, said that it's going to be difficult for him to play if he does not practice this week. So we're probably going to need a return to practice by about Thursday for Justin Fields in order for him to play on Sunday. We will see what's up with that. Hopefully he, of course, his health is okay. Jaden Daniels, another extremely notable quarterback, obviously Washington Commanders. His status is what they classified as in doubt for week 3. We kind of are in wait and see mode. Again, as of this recording, he suffered a knee injury against the Packers, and we will see what happens over the course of this week from a practice perspective for Jaden Daniels. JJ McCarthy, yet another quarterback. The quarterback injuries are out of control already. I've noted over the course of the last couple of years, a lot of times from a super flex perspective, but also from a best ball roster construction perspective or your redraft leagues, you may just end up having to stream guys at the quarterback position because there's so many injuries. 2 years ago, I believe the number was 63 quarterbacks started NFL football games. Last year was, don't quote me, I didn't go double check this. I probably should have, but was in the upper 50s in terms of NFL quarterbacks who started football games last year in the NFL. And we are on pace to shatter probably both of those numbers. We'll see about JJ McCarthy, though the current reports he sprained his ankle in the loss to the Falcons in week 2, and he is out somewhere. The expectation is 2 to 4 weeks for McCarthy. A non-quarterback also for the Minnesota Vikings, a tough start for the Minnesota Vikings with luckily the comeback win against the Bears, but a tough week 2 performance. And then the McCarthy injury, and Aaron Jones, as of this morning, this afternoon, was just placed on injured reserve with a hamstring injury. Obviously, if you know Aaron Jones, a little bit older and has suffered from hamstring injuries over the course of his career. Clearly, this one is not very good. A immediate placement on injured reserve to start the week 3 practice session. There's also the ugly, and that would be, unfortunately, 2 basically season-ending injuries. Of course, Joe Burrow starting at the top. Joe Burrow out for what they're calling 3+ months with a very severe version of turf toe in which he needs to get surgery, is getting surgery for the toe injury that he suffered against the Jaguars. They're saying a minimum of 3 months, which would put him back at the end of the regular season. The Bengals did not make the playoffs last year with Joe Burrow playing really well. Jake Browning was a serviceable replacement in week 2, but I would not be expecting the Bengals to go kind of run the table here in a tough division with a poor defense and now losing Joe Burrow. So I would be shocked if Joe Burrow came back to play this year. But we will see. Maybe we'll get him back at the end of the season. Jayden Reed also for the Packers game was a little bit brutal for some injuries. We talked about Jaden Daniels, and Jayden Reed had the Jones fracture, and now he's out 6 to 8 weeks with a totally separate injury. Pretty crazy. Are they related? Who knows? I'm not a doctor, but we'll be missing Jayden Reed from the Packers for 6 to 8 weeks. We'll talk a little bit about what happened in that game in just a second. For the Packers pass catchers and wide receivers, what does it mean for the Green Bay Packers? But Jayden Reed not out for the season. Maybe now his Jones fracture can heal as well, but a couple of months for Jayden Reed. And then sadly, shout out Austin Eckler, a huge proponent and member himself of the fantasy football community, and just seemingly an awesome guy. Tore his Achilles. This Achilles epidemic is brutal, and it's spreading into football. Basketball players tearing their Achilles all over the place. Austin Eckler, unfortunately, out for the season with an Achilles tear. But that'll do it for the injury report. Let's get to the game by game. All right, speaking of Jayden Reed and the Green Bay Packers, we got the good, the bad, and the ugly for Commanders at Packers. Week 2, starting with the good. We always lead with the good news. The Packers, pretty good at football. I think it's fair to say the Packers are pretty good at football. What an incredible defense. Offense performing at a high level, missing a couple of plays here and there. But Tucker Kraft, we discussed, if you've been a part of our channel, watching some of our content over the course of the summer from our best ball drafting season and fantasy football analysis, if there were a tight end to come from kind of the middle pack of fantasy options to emerge into the superstar tier of the Trey McBrides and Brock Bowers and George Kittles, we felt strongly it would be Tucker Kraft. And as of this recording, Tucker Kraft leads all NFL tight ends in yards per route run, put up an absolutely monster week 2 game, probably a big beneficiary of the Jayden Reed absence, and just an overall really, really awesome football player. Dontavian Wicks also in the absence of Jayden Reed, though drew the first 3, I believe, targets of the game. Dontavian Wicks grew to, the Packers don't ever really play a wide receiver full time. Romeo Doubs is the closest thing they have to a full-time wide receiver, but Dontavian Wicks' role really growing in week 2. We'll see how sticky that is. Malik Heath has performed well in a very tiny little role, and they manufactured a couple touches for Savion Williams, but it does appear without Jayden Reed that Dontavian Wicks at least has some room to grow in his role. The bad from this one was, of course, the notable fantasy god amongst our tiny little niche fantasy football circles. Everybody loves them. Some Ja'Cory Cross-Merritt, aka Bill, but in this one, Austin Eckler obviously played in this game for the majority of the game, and the Commanders were unwilling to fully unleash Ja'Cory Cross-Merritt And I do think that's not something that's going to be sticky. Of course, without Austin Ekeler, they did come out and say they trust him in pass protection. He did whiff pretty badly on a pass block in this game. I think his role is obviously bound to grow moving forward, Bill, for the Commanders. But I also think you see the just general youthful slow starts amongst most running backs, and a 7th round pick, even as talented as Bill is, who did not play football last year. There's just certain things that you need to learn. There's things that require reps and practice, and he'll get there. He's going to have a great rookie season, undoubtedly, but expecting, him to just get loaded up with work at the beginning of the season was probably unrealistic from any of us in the fantasy community, and we saw that. And certainly the usage when playing from behind is not going to be great regardless. I don't think we're going to see Bill out there catching a million passes if the Commanders do fall behind again like they did in this game. That's probably where Jeremy McNichols will come in. Another bad, Terry McLaurin, not worried, on a lot of these bads and sometimes uglies. It's not necessarily a big worry moving forward, but Terry McLaurin has had a rough start. Couple of somewhat tougher matchups, so the Giants maybe not so much, but maybe just not hitting the ground running after missing a lot of camp. We talked about Dontavian Wicks's role growth and Tucker Kraft's strong performance. Matthew Golden, we would love to see some more volume for Matthew Golden, but again, 1st round pick, rookie. It may not happen immediately. The opportunity is going to be there without Jayden Reed, and they have missed him, including in this game, for a couple of deep shots that probably change how the whole world feels about Matthew Golden heading into week 3. I will also say Noah Brown, who was hurt often or extended absence over the course of the summer, missed a lot of training camp, came back for the Washington Commanders, and now he is a long shot to play in week 3, getting banged up himself. So maybe opening the door for some more Jalen Lane, rookie out of, Virginia Tech, for the Commanders. Lastly, the two ugly things are what we just discussed from the injury perspective. I don't think that there's anything truly ugly, if you will, to take away from this game other than Jayden Reed and Austin Ekeler injuries, and of course Jaden Daniels injury as well. All right, we're on to Sunday. Patriots, Dolphins. The good here would certainly be a bounce back from both of these teams. Major struggles on the offensive side of the football in both New England and Miami in week 1, both with pretty strong, generally speaking, performances in this one, though I'm not so sure that we should trust either of these offenses moving forward. I think it might be a little bit of some pretty poor defense on both sides here, but nonetheless, some reasons for optimism for Drake May, Tua, and co. moving forward. The biggest thing I'm most optimistic about out of anybody in this game, Devon Achane, true workhorse, one of, if not the biggest workhorse right now, more than Christian McCaffrey, which we'll get to, more than really anyone from a snaps and touches perspective. Ollie Gordon, very, very much just lightly sprinkled into the game in both weeks 1 and week 2. And Devon Achane just continues to be an absolute workhorse. So as long as the Dolphins are not getting absolutely pummeled, and as long as this season doesn't go completely awry, which it might, Devon Achane is playing just about every snap and getting just about every running back touch for the Dolphins. And we saw in this game what can happen with him and his explosive ability if that occurs. Kayshon Boutte, you'll see Kayshon Boutte showing up a couple times here. I think it's very bullish. Kayshon Boutte is running the most routes. He yet again in week 2 ran the most routes for the New England Patriots, caught a touchdown as well in this game. So that's 2 somewhat positive performances for Kayshon Boutte so far. And then my head is covering up. Look, it's well known I'm a big TreVeyon Henderson fan, but this game was very bullish for Ramondre Stevenson. I thought week 1 he was atrocious and deserved to play less. And then he came out in week 2 and played much better. It wasn't just, coaches putting TreVeyon on the bench, which we'll talk about in just a second, but it was Ramondre playing much better, popped a very long catch and was reasonably solid on the ground. So it was understandable why Ramondre got a little bit more work in this game. The bad, however, TreVeyon Henderson was benched after some failures in pass protection, which is certainly disappointing for TreVeyon fans because he's supposed to be a master in pass protection. It's something he takes a lot of pride in. Got Drake May sacked with a poor pass block in this game. And after that was when ultimately he kind of went away from the game plan. You even saw Antonio Gibson get into the game, a little bit of punishment for the rookie for a missed block. And Ramondre was, of course, playing well, and they were scoring on offense. So there wasn't a lot of reason to change up what they were doing. I don't ultimately think it's super sticky moving forward, but these are the things that can happen, right? This is the risk sometimes with even very talented rookies like TreVeyon. I thought he looked good when he got the football. I thought he looked good overall, but a couple mistakes can land you riding the pine, certainly for a Mike Vrabel coached team. Both defenses, though, if there's a bad from this, I ultimately think I would love to draw things away about these offenses turning things around, but I think these are each individually the worst defense each other are probably going to play this season. So in matchups against tougher teams, like we saw them both in last week, the success is probably not going to be as positive as it was this week for both of these two teams. If we're going to talk about Kayshon Boutte's role being out there and potentially being the wide receiver one for this Patriots team, he still has some work to do. As you see here, the Kayshon Boutte routes were good. The Kayshon Boutte targets were not so good. He did catch a touchdown early in this game and never saw another target. So you can't just be out there running routes. This was the concern about really any Patriots wide receiver. But I think overall a bullish start for Kayshon Boutte, but we're going to need some better performance. This was a pretty good matchup, and he was unable to really separate and draw targets. Hopefully that changes moving forward. Something, if you drafted Ollie Gordon, you're hoping will change moving forward as well is if Achane is the workhorse, the bad would be Ollie Gordon's not playing. Ollie Gordon, who we thought might get some work to spell Achane, to get some goal line work. None of that has manifested in the first 2 weeks. It certainly did not manifest in this game. On the ugly side, let's actually start. The Dolphins are a mess. Okay. I know that they scored some points here. They were in this game. They had a chance to win this game, but even some mistakes on the final drive, some of the, Tua threw for 300 yards, but some of the incompletions, some of the unsuccessful pass attempts were bad yet again. He actually hit Tyreek on like a 50-yard pass that was underthrown by about 20 yards. And I know that's Tua. He doesn't have a very strong arm, but I don't walk away from this game feeling very hopeful for the Miami Dolphins. I think this was one they probably had to get at home against one of the worst teams they'll probably play this season, and they did not. So still very much kind of a mess with the Dolphins. One of the funnier, ugly issues for the New England Patriots is Pop Douglas ran less than 20 routes in this game, despite plenty of dropbacks for Drake May. He somewhat salvaged his week 1 game, despite having one catch, despite having negative yardage, right? He caught a touchdown in week 1, and in week 2 we got positive yards, but it wasn't very pretty for Pop Douglas, and he also was just not on the field as much. So 2 games, Pop Douglas had a pretty strong season last year. Josh McDaniels has been historically pretty good with slot receivers, but that has not come through yet for Pop. So pretty concerned moving forward with Pop Douglas. All right, Bears, Lions. If there was a bounce back game, of which there were many in week 1, the Lions would be the shining example, the poster boys for a week 2 bounce back. They drew those Green Bay Packers, that elite defense that we discussed earlier, in week 1, struggled and came back against a much worse Bears team at home in the Dome. And the Lions do, in fact, still go burr on offense, hanging a 50 ball on their former offensive coordinator, Ben Johnson. I will say, on the flip side, from the Bears, Rome Odunze has really sort of taken this passing game by the horns. We don't have anyone else truly emerging as a focal point of the passing offense, and Rome has really excelled through 2 games. This game in particular was his best. It is his first game in the NFL of 3 yards per route run or greater, and doing so in kind of a catch-up mode in a somewhat of a struggling offense against a Lions defense that was playing reasonably well in that game. A really strong start for Rome. I feel pretty confident in calling him the wide receiver 1 with the Chicago Bears. I also feel pretty confident in calling Kyle Monangai the running back 2 for the Chicago Bears. Didn't get a bunch of touches through the first, 3 quarters of the game. Most of his carries came in garbage time, but he was playing some snaps, spelling DeAndre Swift before then. DeAndre Swift is certainly still the lead back RB1 here, but I don't think DeAndre Swift has proven that he has some form of a stranglehold on this job. So that doesn't mean that it's over for Juwan Johnson, but I do think it means that Kyle Monangai is the next man up based on what we've seen so far. So if you're really desperate for running backs you need somebody on the waiver wire to take a shot on, I think Kyle Monangai is the guy in Chicago. The only other, what I would classify as good, I understand some people may classify this as not good, but over the course of the summer, we collective, the fantasy community, drafting Jahmyr Gibbs in the top 5, hoped that after the end of season run last year, David Montgomery getting injured, Jahmyr Gibbs kind of coming into his prime at the peak of his powers, with David Montgomery sort of aging out a little bit of his prime, new offensive coordinator, that they would pass the torch, if you will, to Jahmyr Gibbs. Instead of this kind of full 50-50 split, sometimes David Montgomery even out snapping Jahmyr Gibbs, that they would sort of not put that genie back in the bottle with Jahmyr Gibbs. And that has been the case through 2 weeks. I understand some people probably are hoping for a little bit more, right? Just give all the keys to Jahmyr Gibbs. I don't think that that's ever really going to happen, and it doesn't happen in most backfields, but we saw it was like 65-35, I believe 66% of the snaps for Jahmyr Gibbs in week 1, and then 60% of the snaps in week 2. So I do think the thesis of Jahmyr Gibbs sort of taking over, if you will, air quotes, taking over that backfield has played itself out, and we saw a pretty big game from Jahmyr Gibbs in week 2 when he's not facing that Green Bay Packers defense. In the bad, we talked about this with DeAndre Swift. I don't want to beat that dead bear. Not a dead horse, but beat that dead bear. The Bears are really struggling to run the football. It doesn't help when DeAndre Swift is your running back. I'm not sure the Kyle Monangai saves that. I'm not sure that Juwan Johnson saves that, but I'm pretty positive that DeAndre Swift isn't saving it either. Isaac Tesla, despite one of the sickest catches of week 1, one of the sickest catches of the season so far in garbage time in week 1, did see an uptick in snaps, but still very much operated as the wide receiver for behind Khalif Raymond and, of course, Amon-Ra St. Brown and Jameson Williams. Just have to shout out, shout-out's probably not the right phrasing, but Caleb Williams continues to struggle. I think as probably a great synopsis of Caleb, he'll show you a flash here and there. I think his pressure avoidance, his ability to scramble and make plays on the run and kind of backyard football it, is very much his best trait and his best skill. But in terms of running an offense, a functional NFL offense, and certainly running one the way Ben Johnson, the hardo that he is, wants it to be run, I think Caleb's still got quite a ways to go here. On the ugly side, unfortunately, as much as I would love, I don't know if you can see, there's a lot of St. Louis memorabilia behind me. I often am wearing St. Louis clothing. That is where I am from. Luther Burden from right down the road from me, one of my favorite players ever. The role has not come through yet. Olamide Zaccheaus has been the slot receiver for the Chicago Bears. Nothing, certainly not startable. Luther Burden, certainly not, someone we should be looking at our best ball teams hoping for a good game as of yet, because that role has not manifested itself at all for Luther Burden, though some positive quotes out of Chicago with Luther Burden. And I don't think Zaccheaus is exactly similar to DeAndre Swift. I don't think there's some stranglehold on that job. After an 0-2 start and some struggles, I think that Luther Burden has some role growth coming probably sooner rather than later, but it's not there yet. And it's also really not there for first round tight end, 10th overall pick. I just can't understand drafting Colston Loveland 10th overall and playing Cole Kmet every snap. Colston Loveland not targeted, I believe, once in the passing game. In this game, he played 30-something snaps. It's just not great. Something's going to have to change. Maybe Loveland isn't ready. I can't say. I'm not in practices, but we're going to need to see roles change. At the end of the day, certainly for Luther Burden, but also for Colston Loveland, we're going to need to see something change here for these roles. Loveland is in sort of this Dalton Kincaid, Dawson Knox disaster scenario where even if he starts earning targets, which he has not yet, even if he starts earning targets like Dalton Kincaid has in his young career, he's just not out there enough to like really matter for a tight end. We'll talk about Dalton Kincaid later, but this is the problem for Colston Loveland is that even if the volume starts coming while he's on the field, there's not enough routes for him to really matter for fantasy purposes. All right, Jags, Bengals, one of the more fun games, but also one of the sadder games for multiple reasons. Let's just start with the ugly because we talked about it at the top. Joe Burrow, of course, got injured in this game. The Bengals' inability to build a competent offensive line for essentially the entire career of Joe Burrow gets him injured yet again, out for 3+ months. I think Jake Browning can do enough to get the football to your Jamar Chase, T. Higgins teams are certainly not dead. I thought Jake Browning made some good throws, and I thought he made some bad throws in this game. He dropped one to Chase in the bucket. Nice little hole shot that was pretty beautiful for a backup quarterback, but he also made some poor throws. I'm hopeful, generally speaking, relative to other backup quarterbacks, like we may be discussing in a little bit. Carson Wentz is starting. Oh my gosh. But it's a downgrade. It's certainly a downgrade. And I would also say that my biggest concern in terms of a player that I'm downgrading personally, I think this is disastrous for Chase Brown. Chase Brown is a good football player. Chase Brown is not Saquon Barkley. Chase Brown is not Jonathan Taylor, Derrick Henry. He's not even Devon Achane. He's a volume-based back who we drafted highly because he was on the Joe Burrow Bengals, not the Jake Browning Bengals. And so, if you have Chase Brown and anybody's willing to let you out of that one, give you something of note for Chase Brown in your fantasy league, I think that's feasible. He's going to get the ball. But we just saw, a game and a half with Joe Burrow of Chase Brown not doing anything. And now he's going to have Jake Browning. He's already losing snaps on passing downs to Samaje Perine. This thing could go south in a hurry without Joe Burrow. I know they're 2-0, so that helps. But the schedule is going to get tough, and I'm pretty worried about specifically Chase Brown for the Bengals. Just wrap up the ugly. We'll start with the ugly on this one because unfortunately, when Joe Burrow gets injured like that, we would be burying the lead if we didn't start there. But I'd just say I've heard a lot of, and I get it, Trevor Lawrence is not a particularly awesome quarterback. He makes some poor throws. I wish he were better. He's the Kyle Pitts of tight ends. We just keep hoping that he'll get better, and he's just mediocre at best. And that is acceptable. That is an acceptable view, in my opinion, of Trevor Lawrence. However, he was not helped out by the Jacksonville Jaguars in this game. 5 drops by wide receivers. One truly horrible drop by Brian Thomas Jr. at the end of the game. Wide open, a little 5-yard hitch, check down, right? Just sit down, show Trevor Lawrence your numbers, and catch the ball. And he started looking, he pulled the old high school move of starting to look up the field before he caught the ball and drops it, which what should have been a touchdown probably helps the Jaguars win that football game. And I think Brian let's go this way then. Let's go from the ugly to the bad. Brian Thomas Jr. was horrible in this football game. It has come out since that he had a wrist injury. Liam Cohen mentioned that BTJ had something going on with his wrist, so it's certainly possible that that's what it was. But if you watched, there's multiple occasions where I get people call them hospital balls, but like unfortunately, part of playing wide receiver in the NFL is you're going to have to go over the middle sometimes, and you're going to have to catch passes that you're probably going to get hit hard on. It just is an unfortunate part of the job, unless you play for the Philadelphia Eagles and they don't throw the ball over the middle. Brian Thomas Jr. was unwilling to multiple times. He was alligator arming a couple of plays over the middle, stopped short on an interception from Trevor Lawrence. It wasn't great for BTJ. I'm willing to throw it out and say, look, these are just, it's a rough start in the Liam Cohen era. Cohen era, and Brian Thomas will be fine. I trust in his talent, of course. I'm not selling Brian Thomas Jr., but I think it's at least notable. It's only fair if we're going to criticize, whoever. If I'm going to criticize Pop Douglas, if I'm going to criticize Kayshon Boutte for only earning one target this week, I think we should criticize Brian Thomas Jr. when he plays poorly. It's not over, but this wasn't all Trevor Lawrence's fault. I would argue it was not even nearly entirely Trevor Lawrence's fault. Travis Hunter, it probably didn't help Trevor Lawrence. Travis Hunter played less on offense this week and ran fewer routes. They had the Jacksonville Jaguars had a corner get injured, and in the second half, Hunter went over and played more defense. Hunter himself also got banged up in this game, and this was just sort of the concern with Travis Hunter. I will say, even in his snaps on offense, has not been particularly good. He's like out there operating like Pop Douglas. Like he's playing as a slot receiver, and he's catching a bunch of like slot short stuff. He's been targeted a couple times down the field, but it's not a particularly, beneficial role from a fantasy perspective. And he hasn't like been a difference maker in terms of what he's doing on the football field. And so in all the conversation over the summer of anybody in fantasy circles, like how much offense is he going to play? Can he play both sides of the football? I think we're seeing some of the concerns with an archetype like Travis Hunter, where he went over, started playing defense. Now he's gotten banged up a little bit. Now they need him more on defense, so he plays less on offense. Parker Washington played a little bit more on offense. I think game to game it's going to be a little tricky for Travis Hunter, and he's not yet, playing at the level that we want to see, despite a matchup with the Carolina Panthers, one of the worst defenses in the NFL, and the Cincinnati Bengals, another one of the worst defenses in the NFL. It's a little bit concerning that these wide receivers and Trevor Lawrence haven't gotten home in those matchups, because it's not going to get easier. It's going to get tougher in most of these spots for the Jags. It's also going to get tougher for Chase Brown. As we mentioned at the top, he struggled again against the Jags. Tougher matchup against Cleveland in week one, but he got the volume. And in this game, he didn't really do much of anything. On the good side, enough negativity, because there was a lot of positives also in this game. And it starts with Bashal Tuten. The Jacksonville Jaguars trade away Tank Bigsby to the Philadelphia Eagles immediately. Travis Etienne is still the lead back in this backfield. I'm, as you see right here, right there. Etienne still good. Travis Etienne had a nice day. They had a couple of interesting plays where they had Travis Etienne and Bashal Tuten on the field at the same time. Shout out to Liam Cohen. I think one of my takeaways thus far from the Jacksonville Jaguars is wheels up Bashal Tuten. If you're in a pinch at RB2 or a zero running back team that's hurting right now, Bashal Tuten is someone that you can start. This is a tough matchup this coming week in week 3, but I think the role is going to be very good and continue to grow. But Travis Etienne is also not going anywhere. You should be excited about Travis Etienne as well. I'm not sure he's as good. And I shouldn't even say that. He's not as good like with the football in his hands as Bashal Tuten is, but I do think that they trust him in a variety of different roles. There was a rotation here with Travis Etienne being kind of the lead, LaQuint Allen coming in occasionally, third long down in distances. I think that will be his role, but wheels up for Bashal Tuten for sure. And Travis Etienne. Also helpful that Jamar Chase did bounce back. I will just say a good chunk of his production was with Joe Burrow, but they did still continue to look to him with Jake Browning. They just threw him screens. They run some stuff to just make sure they get the football in the hands of Jamar Chase. I do think that will continue to happen, even if we lose some efficiency with a worse quarterback at the helm. And then my head is covering up. If you're watching on YouTube, it says Diami is best ball. That's not it. Let me move. Diami is best ball useful is what this says. If we're talking about the Travis Hunter issues with the amount of routes and everything, Diami is essentially an every snap player for the Jaguars. He did have a couple of bad drops in this game as well, but also caught a touchdown. I think you're going to absolutely get some useful games from Diami Brown. You should be excited about those shares, even if, he's not the next Brian Thomas Jr., but he is going to be a useful asset to have on your best ball teams. New York Giants against the Dallas Cowboys. One of the what a game. Absolute shootout, bonkers game. And it starts on the good side. Javonte Williams, the RB3 in fantasy through 2 games. Javonte's role is about as good as it can get. I don't think he is some absolutely special football player, but the role is exactly what you were hoping for. If you drafted him in your 0 running back teams, your hero running back teams, Javonte Williams is a guy you can just start every single week because he has all the high value touches on a good Dallas Cowboys offense. And he's just good enough to where it matters. Cam Skattebo also, he started. I'm not ready to crown Cam Skattebo, but we did see Cam Skattebo take over more of the backfield from Tyrone Tracy already in week 2. He is a really fun guy to watch play football. I still don't know really what to make of Cam Skattebo in the NFL. He looks like he is trying to hurt someone on every single play, but it's interesting. It's very interesting. But he did, of course, start to become the RB1 in New York, and I'm not sure that anything has changed from Tyrone Tracy's performance to make me think that Scat isn't going to continue in that role. I will also just say, amongst the good, both of these offenses, I know the Giants struggled in week 1, but both of these offenses, and particularly probably in games with the Dallas Cowboys defense, these teams are slinging that pigskin. Russell Wilson, shout out Alex Berg from the Spike Week Discord, which, of course, if you're not a member of the Discord, there's a link in the description. It is free to join, $5 to see all the there's not going to be all the channels that you'll be able to see. If you join for free, you can join for $5 and get access to all the premium channels. Berg mentioned today 500 air yards from Russell Wilson in this game. 500. And he converted on 60% of those air yards. He's one of 9 quarterbacks in the last 20 years to have a 500 air yard game where you convert on 60% of them. And Russ has done it twice. He's throwing the ball downfield. He's throwing the ball downfield to Malik Neighbors like crazy. Piggybacking on that, Malik Neighbors leads the NFL in air yards through 2 weeks with 385. Second most amongst wide receivers in the NFL is CeeDee Lamb at 305. 385, you're up by 80 over second place in air yards. The Malik Neighbors role is absolutely insane. Say whatever we want about Russell Wilson. And I talked last week on this very show about how I don't know that Russ is the answer for Malik Neighbors and probably for Wan'Dale Robinson, who also saw a monster air yards game in this, one of the best games of Wan'Dale Robinson, probably the best game of Wan'Dale Robinson's career. His role also outstanding. And it has to do with this air yard stuff. They're throwing the ball downfield. They're being aggressive, and it's working. They're scoring points. And on the flip side, as CeeDee is second in the NFL in air yards. Dak Prescott's throwing the ball downfield. George Pickens continues to draw pass interferences. He also had a very good game here. Jake Ferguson with a ton of catches, maybe not as many air yards, but a bunch of catches as the underneath guy for the Cowboys. It's just wheels up on these offenses for the time being because they're in an NFL where teams like the Eagles will get to their air yards, I promise. And when teams like the Eagles are unwilling to throw, and they're unwilling to throw the ball down the field, and they're unwilling to do anything creative, these two teams are throwing the football down the field aggressively and successfully, and that breeds fantasy goodness. It breeds games like this where it's 80 points, and it also breeds a ton of fantasy upside just overall for quarterbacks, running backs, wide receivers, tight ends, everything. These two teams are awesome for fantasy. That's the good. We got to talk about the bad, though. If Cam Skattebo is moving ahead, Tyrone Tracy is falling behind. Not much else to add there, but Tyrone Tracy, something to monitor. I don't think that whole situation has completely played itself out. And of course, even if Skattebo takes over, Tyrone Tracy does not lose his contingent value. He would then gain contingent value. But we will see how the Giants play out. I would expect Skattebo, to lead them in touches in week 3. The guy who fell behind and hasn't started to climb back yet, Jaden Blue, inactive in week 2, and I'm not really sure anything happened to feel like that's going to change. Dallas won the game. Dallas probably feels like they should have won week 1, and they've gotten good performance out of Javonte. Miles Sanders even scored a touchdown in this game. The other bad, look, I have some Darius Slayton, some early Darius Slayton, May, June teams, just drafting some Darius Slayton for some of those, what you'd think would be in this high air yards offense, some downfield big plays. Holy cow. 3 total targets, absolute wind sprinter. He's running a lot of routes. And he's doing a lot of nothing. It's been a tough scene for Darius Slayton thus far. Don't go look at his yards per route run or targets per route run. It's bad. It's a tough scene for Darius Slayton. All the targets going to Malik Neighbors and Wan'Dale Robinson and the running backs, with just a tiny sprinkle of Theo Johnson. A little worried about him as well. The ugly, nothing special. Just I think the Giants defense, who we thought would be a little bit better this year, has been quite bad. Granted, they played 2 really good offenses. And the Cowboys defense that we thought, oh, maybe they're not as bad. I think that was an Eagles thing. I think the Eagles made the Cowboys defense look better, which is insane. But the Eagles lack any aggression on offense, and that's what made the Cowboys defense look a little bit better. And then they played the Giants, and we saw how bad they really were. Browns, Ravens. If teams like the Lions and frankly the Giants are bounce back performances in week 2, the Browns are a little bit of a fall back to earth. In shocking fashion, playing the Baltimore Ravens on the road at Baltimore is probably not going to yield the dividends that playing the Cincinnati Bengals at home in week 1 yields. That being said, on the good side, it was still a great start for Quinshon Judkins. I didn't have that on my bingo card, him leading the Browns backfield in touches, him leading the Browns backfield in snaps. It was a little weird and a little misleading. He had 1 big play and a decent start for Quinshon Judkins, and certainly projecting him moving forward, you're projecting him to lead this backfield. It was still a split. We'll get to that in a minute. The biggest story from this for me was Zay Flowers. After week 1, I wasn't really sure. I'm a Zay fan, noted Zay fan. And I wasn't totally sure the extent at which he was the alpha in this passing game, how much that would carry over. And the Bills defense was really struggling against the Ravens in week 1. Was it kind of a game plan specific thing? Was it, a little fluky or what have you? Game got into a shootout, right? We're just going to go to our top option. And against a good Browns defense. And don't get this twisted. The Ravens scored 41 points, but they didn't even have 300 yards. Now, they only ran 50 plays again, which is insane. They're just so insane. They score so many points on so few plays. They've scored 80 points in 100 plays. Literally. The Ravens have scored 80 points in 100 plays in 2 weeks. But they didn't have 300 yards. The Browns defense completely shut down Derrick Henry. And you wonder, how is this going to turn out for Zay Flowers in a tougher matchup? Nope. It's still the Zay Flowers show in the passing game. You need to be starting Zay Flowers every single week. You need to be excited about Zay Flowers moving forward. If he has been the kind of alpha before, he is an absolute full-blown alpha for this Baltimore Ravens team right now, even if he didn't catch a touchdown this week. Shout out Devontae Walker. Shout out DeAndre Hopkins for doing the DeAndre Hopkins stuff. This offense rocks. Who also rocks is Harold Fannin. He wasn't as good this week, just 5 targets on 40-something pass attempts for the Cleveland Browns. But even, still had a solid game. Certainly if you're playing in the main event on FFPC, tight end premium formats or just deeper formats. Harold Fannin is a tight end 1, wherever you would like to classify him. But he's currently 6th amongst all tight ends in yards per route run. And that's pretty darn good, I would say, for a rookie 3rd-round pick. He is not going to come out and just lead the team in targets, but the role is really, really strong. And you should be very excited to play Harold Fannin every single week. On the bad side, talked about Derrick Henry getting shut down. This is when we talk about over the course of the summer of being cautious about Derrick Henry when we have to pay really hefty prices in best ball or your fantasy football league. It's not that Derrick Henry isn't going to have good games. Look what happened in week 1. It's that the floor is catastrophically low for a high draft capital running back. Even when Saquon Barkley doesn't rip off a long run, he's still going to catch a few passes. He's still going to, the Eagles are never going to give up on this run game thing. And as we saw, they're not going to throw. And when they do, they might throw to him without Will Shipley. There's just games like this where you face a good defense like the Browns and they shut down Derrick Henry. They don't allow him to get, if he gets through the line untouched, it's a knockout blow. he's going to get into the open field. The safeties and corners are going to try to tackle him, and he's going to get rolling, right? He's still very fast. But there are games like this where 2 fantasy points from my first round pick running back, my 1-2 turn pick running back. This is the concern. He's going to have a great year. The Ravens are going to be awesome. Derrick Henry's going to score 1 million touchdowns again, but these games do happen, and this kind of a floor is a bit concerning for the draft capital spent on Derrick Henry. Speaking of the floor for the draft capital spent, I mean, Mark Andrews, hello? I thought we were going to get some good games before Isaiah Likely came back, brother. And it's about as bad as it can get. Mark Andrews is on a milk carton somewhere out in Baltimore, and I'm not sure this is recoverable. I think that when Isaiah Likely comes back, he's gonna take away from Mark Andrews. I think this is Zay's passing game. I think that they trust Rashad Bateman enough still, and Lamar trusts taking some shots to DeAndre Hopkins. Devontae Walker is getting out there. I'm not sure where we go from here for Mark Andrews. I should have maybe put this in the ugly. It's he's running routes, he's just not getting the football. So tough scene for Mark Andrews. He did have an end zone target in week 2 that he did not come down with. It was a tougher catch, but nonetheless. The ugly, this is probably unfair of me to put this in the ugly, because Quinshon Judkins really did look solid in week 2. But what I will say is they played all 3 backs. It was kind of an even split almost. Now, Dylan Sampson got a few snaps at the end. Dylan Sampson kind of sucked out, and his touchdown was in garbage time with Dylan Gabriel in the game, so we should not be expecting that to happen every single week. But they did play all 3 backs, including it, when the game was close. Dylan Sampson got out there, Jerome Ford got out there, Quinshon Judkins led the way from a touch perspective and from a snap perspective, but it wasn't like, oh, Quinshon Judkins is getting 70% of this backfield. They were playing all 3 guys. I'm not sure that continues. I suspect Jerome Ford might go away at a certain point once they trust Dylan Sampson or Quinshon Judkins in pass protection. But as of right now, it's a little bit of a scary 3-way split in Cleveland. Not sure if you have watched that Puka Nacua guy, or even that Davante Adams guy, or that Matthew Stafford guy for the Rams. But pretty good start to the season for the Rams, despite a little bit of a tough matchup in week 1. The Houston Texans defense is for real, and Puka is that dude. Leads the NFL in yards per route run thus far in the 2025 NFL season. And that's while taking a carry, an end around. He got a carry for a touchdown. Breaking tackles somehow. I still don't know how he scored on that play, but Puka is just absolutely elite and clearly a must start. And what in the hell were we doing letting him fall to the second round of fantasy drafts at the end of the summer? What are we doing here? Just insane. But that being said, his counterpart, Davante Adams, he bounced back in a big way. Struggled a little bit in week 1, first game with Matthew Stafford, facing Derek Stingley, who gave Mike Evans fits on Monday night. Davante bounces back. I said here on your screen, he still has it. Not just because he had a good game, although he led the team in targets. He's still making these insane catches, and Stafford is willing to put it in spots because he trusts Davante and he trusts Puka Nacua. That little trio is bonkers. And just watch some Rams football. It's fun to watch those 3 play. It's also fun to watch Erik Beimfohr, who, after leading the team in targets in week 1, pops up and finds the end zone in week 2, has a really strong week 2. Not sure that I'm comfortable starting Ayomanor or anything just yet, but I am pretty comfortable in saying that we feel really good about having him as a late round pick on your best ball teams, and we might get to the point where he's startable. Blake Corum stole some work from Kyren Williams. I'm not quite ready yet to draw anything away from that. It was a little bit more kind of when the game was out of hand in the second half. But notable, right? Let's put a pin in the Blake Corum thing and see how this thing goes moving forward. I'll also just add Jordan Whittington continues. I shouldn't say continued. Operated. Tutu Atwell got banged up in this game. Jordan Whittington operated as wide receiver 3, but he has sort of operated as the wide receiver 3 up until this point for the Rams, and is someone that, if you believe in like wide receiver contingent value, and you're searching for wide receiver upside, like on the waiver wires, he is a guy I think that you should be adding, because if something were to happen to Javonte or something were to happen to Puka, this is a guy you can start in your fantasy leagues. On the bad side of things, Calvin Ridley's kind of slow start, continued to be tied for the lead in targets on the team, but it wasn't great. I'm not overly worried, but I think this is, we'll talk about like the DK Metcalfs and Jacoby Myers and such of the world, but this is why these archetypes are tricky. You're projecting a lot of volume onto them, but they're kind of not on very good teams. We don't know what Cam Ward's going to be. And Calvin Ridley is a good football player, but he is not a super, right? You see the Puka stuff on that side of the screen? That's what the superstars do. Calvin Ridley comes out and has tougher matchups. Puka had tougher matchups too. And, gets shut down by Patrick Surtain in week 1 and struggles in week 2. Better days are ahead for Calvin Ridley for sure. And the Tennessee Titans, they're going to get into some better spots here, especially in their division, the Colts and the Jags and stuff. But this is a bit of the concern for Calvin Ridley. I think the start will pick up, but it's a slow one nonetheless. Part of the reason why it's a slow one is the next bullet you see here. Cam Ward leads the league in the most sacks taken. Part of that is 2 really good defenses. Denver is a good defense, despite what the Colts just did to him. And I think the Rams have a very good defense. Both also have very good pass rushes. But I think it's one of those rookie things, one of those concerns. Cam Ward made an awesome highlight throw. Awesome is a funny word. He threw the ball. He ran around and threw the ball a million miles back across the field, which is like what you're not supposed to do. But it was such a Cam Ward type play for a touchdown. But I think that is like all that kind of plays together. He takes some risks, he holds the football, and that's going to lead to some stalled out drives by taking sacks and such from Cam Ward. But hopefully some of the shot taking will lend itself to Calvin Ridley and of course Erik Beimfohr. The ugly look. I understand why we all thought that Tony Pollard was going to really pop when Tyjae Spears was out. He's going to get all of the work. I think the days of thinking that Tony Pollard is like a real the Dallas Cowboys days when he was behind Ezekiel Elliott built up this Tony Pollard thing to make us feel when I say us and we, I'm talking to me as well, to be like, yeah, Pollard's going to get all the work. He's still explosive. He's efficient. He can catch the ball and all this. And these 4 weeks were when we were supposed to extract our Tony Pollard value. These are supposed to be the weeks where he's an RB1. And then when Tyjae comes back, if I don't feel like starting him, if I'm not getting my, then I can use my Jordan Mason, right? Then I can use my other backs when Tyjae Spears comes back. And the matchups have been tough, but the volume is supposed to come through and make the matchups irrelevant here. And it just has not been the case for Tony Pollard. Single-digit fantasy points in back-to-back games to start the season. Without Tyjae, it's a little bit of a tough scene for old Tony Pollard. Our 49ers at the Saints. The 49ers survive. The Saints keep taking all these teams down to the wire. Kellen Moore doing a sneaky good job. I should have put that in the good. Kellen Moore. Yeah, I guess I did. The Saints right there are still plucky. They were plucky in week 1 and they're plucky in week 2. I think that the Saints are going to give some people fits, and they may not win very many games. They may not win but 1 or 2 or 3 games all season, but Kellen Moore is doing a pretty good job with this team. And starting at the bottom, now we're here. Juwan Johnson, for real. Shout out to our buddy Ben Gretsch of Stealing Signals. He does, signal or noise. Kind of every week of something that we saw from a game. Was that signal or was that noise? Juwan Johnson is signal. This ain't noise. This is signal. He leads the entire NFL amongst tight ends in targets. He's been operating as basically an elite tight end. Now, they don't have anyone else. The Foster Moreau and Taysom Hill tandem are both hurt. So Juwan is basically playing every single snap through 2 weeks. But he's a converted wide receiver in an offense that could use a playmaker. He's creating mismatches, and Spencer Rattler trusts him in the end zone, trusts him all over the field, trusts him in catch-up mode, and he's dominating targets alongside Chris Olave in this offense. The Juwan thing is for real. You can start him very comfortably in just about every matchup. This was not a great matchup. The 49ers and Fred Warner are not historically a great matchup for tight ends, and Juwan Johnson did it again, right? Found the end zone, racked up a million targets, And I think we just continue to be excited for Juwan Johnson. I would just say on the 49ers side, Mac Jones is an interesting watch. He'll do some good things here and there. His throwing motion throws me off, though I'm a lefty, and I know the lefty throwing motion throws people off too. Mac does some really bad things, which is why he's a backup quarterback, right? But I think he can keep this ship afloat until Brock Purdy comes back, and he did a good enough job doing so, despite really a real lack of weapons in this game without George Kittle, without Brandon Ayuk, with the banged up Juwan Jennings, and on down the list. On the bad side, I think despite 2 good fantasy scores from Christian McCaffrey, I think the idea that Christian McCaffrey is just Christian McCaffrey is a little bit of fool's gold. He's going to get plenty of work. They're going to, center the offense around Christian McCaffrey. But this in particular was a really good matchup against the New Orleans Saints, a poor defense, and you would hope for some efficiency. And there was yet again, for 2 weeks in a row, a real lack of efficiency from Christian McCaffrey. He's dependent upon a ton of volume. And the interesting thing about the volume is that Brian Robinson continues to play a very real role in this offense. Why I say on your screen here, CMC isn't quite CMC, is because A, the efficiency isn't there, but B, even if it isn't, there were games where it wasn't for him in the past. It was every touch, right? We're talking about 90, 99, 95% of snaps, 98% of backfield touches. That's not the case here. It's in the 70s. Brian Robinson is playing real snaps and getting real touches in this backfield. So is CMC a modern day workhorse still? Yes, of course. Compared to Jahmyr Gibbs and compared to all these other guys, he is a modern day workhorse, but he is not the old school Christian McCaffrey. And so in a Mac Jones offense with a poor offensive line, they're probably not going to score 1,000,000 points. I think Christian McCaffrey is, of course, going to be good for the next little while until everybody gets back. But I think it's fair to the idea of, well, CMC should just be the 101 because he's going to get all the work again. What if he's old CMC? I don't think this is old CMC. Unfortunately, the curse of the 49ers injury bug just moves on down. Kyle Juszczyk is now hurt and probably going to miss some extended time. These guys are cursed, man. I don't know what is buried underneath the facility in San Francisco, but every game is just someone new getting injured, and add another actually like not fantasy relevant player, but a critical player for the 49ers offense in Kyle Juszczyk. Lastly, the ugly is just that injuries. My God, please come back. George Kittle. George Kittle is going to smash when he comes back. We'll see about Brandon Ayuk, but George Kittle is going to be awesome as soon as he comes back. Seahawks Steelers was simultaneously the most boring game of the week and the most fun game of the week. There's always just chaotic stuff that continues to happen in both of these teams' games, actually. Go look at the box score for Zach Charbonnet versus Ken Walker. It's really funny. Ken Walker was arguably the best back from a rushing perspective on the week in the NFL. He was certainly up there. Really strong game from Ken Walker. But what I will say is that's the good. He's going to have to stack more goods. We're going to have to come back every Tuesday, and we're going to have to stack more goods for Ken Walker, because I think this team knows what they have in Zach Charbonnet. And Zach Charbonnet having a couple of poor yards per carry games, especially given the fact they won this game, is not of concern to them. They know what they're getting from Zach Charbonnet. And part of why Ken Walker can continue to excel and stay fresh is because this is a split backfield. And I do think that probably continues, as you see in the middle section amongst the bad. The Seahawks split backfield is something that I suspect continues and is ultimately probably bad for Ken Walker and not as bad for Zach Charbonnet, but we would ideally rather have, somebody kind of take command here. On the good side, Jaylen Warren, the Jaylen Warren had a catch and run. His overall game was good, but I put that he popped on here. Go watch the Jaylen Warren catch and run, because that was epic. That was an absolutely incredible football play. Jaylen Warren still good at football. Kenny Gainwell, not special, and we'll get to Caleb Johnson. I promise. Jackson Smith-Njigba probably burying the lead. Jackson Smith-Njigba is emerging into elite levels of wide receiver play. Is he going to reach, the Puka, CD, Chase, neighbors tier. I'm not sure, but he's getting every opportunity to do so in Seattle. Sam Darnold loves him. The offense is built around Jackson Smith and Jigba, and so long as that continues, he's a must start every single week. I don't care about the matchups, and you should be excited to have him on your best ball teams. From a bad perspective, we talked about the Seahawks split backfield. I'll also just say the Steelers offense is it's just not very good, man. Like, this is back-to-back weeks. I know they scored a bunch of points in week 1. This is back-to-back weeks of last week was 271 yards of total offense. This week was in the 260s. So we're talking about the Baltimore Ravens having scored 80 points and having 700 yards of total offense in 2 weeks. We're talking about the Steelers having scored a decent amount of points, but barely cracking 500 total yards of offense. There's a lack of explosion to this offense. Jaylen Warren popped that big play, and that was nice. But the kind of concerns about an Arthur Smith, Aaron Rodgers offense are coming to fruition. I will also say the Steelers' defense hasn't been very good through 2 games. They just got carved up by the Jets, and we'll talk about Jets-Bills. The Jets-Bills did not make me feel very bullish for the Jets, and that team destroyed the Steelers' defense. And then they came out, and the Sam Darnold offense that really kind of struggled in week 1 against the 49ers, they got carved up by them as well. Is the Steelers' defense still really as good as the Steelers' defense has been historically? So far, it doesn't feel that way, but we'll see as we get more games under our belt. Honestly, if there's one thing that I'm mostly concerned about in this, it's DK Metcalf's role. DK Metcalf was projected to be and is sort of the wide receiver 1 in Pittsburgh, but this is very Arthur Smith in that 9 different players got a target in this game, and they didn't throw 50 passes, so it wasn't like that. It was spreading the ball out, getting all of our tight ends involved, getting all of our running backs involved. DK Metcalf not dominating targets, but also more so than the fact that he's just not why he's not dominating targets is the role. He has been a 12 plus aDOT player for his entire career. That's what he does, right? He's a downfield weapon, big, fast, strong, tough to cover down the field. So far through 2 games for the Pittsburgh Steelers, DK Metcalf's aDOT, 5.5 yards. We're using DK Metcalf like he's fucking Wan'Dale Robinson. What are we doing? Wan'Dale Robinson is getting multiple deep shots down the field from Russell Wilson, and we're using DK Metcalf like he's a glorified slot receiver? What's going on here? It's pretty concerning. The even worse, though, is the ugly side, Caleb Johnson. I mean, it hasn't been a good start. It wasn't a good summer. It hasn't been a good start. He fumbled last week, and he's returning kicks, and he doesn't understand the rules of returning kicks. He's costing his team games. Aaron Rodgers, Arthur Smith, Mike Tomlin are not going to put up with that. I still believe that Caleb Johnson is the best pure runner on this team, but he's about to ruin every opportunity that he might have to ever show that based on all of these mistakes through 2 games. All right, Bills, Jets. We can fly through this one. The Jets were abysmal. The ugly is everything about the Jets. The bad is Fields also got concussed in this game. I will also say the Bills, this is a good example, like we talked about with Derrick Henry, of the Bills' passing game volatility. Even when the Ravens blow someone out, like just happened, Lamar's just still, like, he throws 4 touchdowns, and you still get useful games from Zay Flowers, because all they do is throw it. Even though they only threw it 29 times, the Ravens did, Zay Flowers gets 10 of them. In the Bills' passing offense, that's not the case. They dominate the Jets, and they don't throw, and it's spread out amongst a bunch of guys. So there's just a little more volatility in the Keons and the Kincaids and the Shakirs and everything. On the good side, hot start for James Cook. Inefficient in week 1, but finds the end zone and catches a few passes. And then in this one, just carves up the Jets on the ground, 100 plus yards rushing and 2 touchdowns. James Cook off to currently the RB1 in fantasy. Not sure that I would bet on that to maintain. He is still he's only played about 50% of snaps through 2 weeks. So he's running real hot, and he's a guy who should continue to run above expectation, but I think there's going to be some down games for James Cook, but a really, really hot start nonetheless. Garrett, in this loss, if we're taking something good away from the Jets, this is still Garrett Wilson's offense from a passing game perspective, and I think there's going to be plenty of good games in there. I'll also say Dalton Kincaid, despite that volatility we talked about, when he's out there, he's earning targets. He's getting targeted. I'm another one. I'm putting a pin in the Dalton Kincaid thing. I'm not going to call this a full-blown breakout, but I'm interested to see how the Kincaid thing continues to go for the Bills. Put a pin in that one. All right, on to the afternoon. Panthers-Cardinals. The Cardinals do what they do and get out to a lead against a bad team and go into a shell and let the Panthers come back in this one. That being said, Trey McBride is just a baller. Absolute baller. Highest floor tight end that exists in fantasy football. He's the focal point of the offense. Just going to continue to rock out good games. Please, Lord, please get this man in the end zone. We deserve some Trey McBride touchdowns. Tedero McMillan, aka T-Mac. They threw a lot of passes in their comeback effort, but I thought T-Mac actually looked even better this week than he did last week, and he's looked really, really good. The Panthers may hold him back. This current version of the Panthers, maybe when Jalen Coker comes back to take away some stress from him, but this kid looks outstanding so far through 2 games for the Panthers. The Trey Benson performance was quite notable. 6 targets for Trey Benson against a bad Carolina Panthers run defense. James Conner struggles again, back-to-back weeks. It's only a couple games of James Conner. Maybe he pops up for a big game in week 3, but Trey Benson has outplayed him for back-to-back games and even drew 6 targets this week. I still can't believe that. And maybe I'll just keep saying 6 targets. Good start for Trey Benson. Not so good start for James Conner. Chuba, get my head out of the way. Chuba does take back a bunch of the passing game work. The concern for Chuba was bringing in Rico Dowdle, and they love him as a passing down player. But in the comeback effort, Chuba did play a lot on passing downs, and yet again got in the end zone back-to-back weeks. Useful weeks for Chuba Hubbard by finding the end zone for this Panthers team. On the bad side, I don't want to keep hammering this home, but if you haven't watched before, you haven't listened to my content, my take about the Arizona Cardinals is they are like an NBA team, modern day NBA, current version of the NBA, trying to win games without shooting 3-pointers. And you just can't. You can't win football games if you can't create explosive plays. You have to. Unless you're the Philadelphia Eagles. And even then, they're barely winning games that they should probably win easily. You need to create explosive plays, whether it be in the run game, right? Whether it be in the passing game, whether it be at least taking shots down the field that stress the defense, having some form of something that makes the defense feel like you might hit a home run. They have none of that. And Michael Wilson isn't providing it. Certainly Greg Dortch is not. Zay Jones is not. Marv is a solid player, but that's not his forte. And as good as Trey McBride is, he's a tight end. So we're going to need to get some juice going in the Arizona Cardinals offense, and I'm not sure where it comes from. Marv does sputter in this game. I sort of thought that might happen with J.C. Horn blocked in on him for, which also happened to Brian Thomas Jr. in week 1. I've been really actually quite hopeful about what I've seen from Marvin Harrison Jr. despite this down game. We'll see what happens in week 3. Just more the ancillary Cardinals. It's just depressing. There's Michael Wilson. Like I can't believe they ran it back. I just can't believe they didn't add to this. You really you watched 2 years of Michael Wilson and you thought that's who we want this guy to be. You watched the current version of Zay Jones and Greg Dortch and said those guys will elevate our offense around McBride and Marv. Just insane. But the real ugly, even worse. Yes, there's worse than Michael Wilson. There's worse than Greg Dortch. Xavier Legette. It's over. I'm done. If he comes back and buries me, I will congratulate him and wave the white flag. I didn't particularly like him as a prospect, so there's some bias here, but a terrible rookie season. And now through 2 games with no Jalen Coker and no Adam Thielen and his team needing production, they're losing these games. They need him to step up. He has 12 targets. He's basically running every single route. This man has 12 targets for 8 receiving yards. You heard that right. 12 targets for 8 receiving yards. It's over. Sorry, Xavier Legette. I love your voice. I don't love your game. Broncos, Colts. I'm going to start with the ugly because I bet on the Broncos, and I'm still triggered by it. Truly laughable penalty by the Broncos. So the Broncos take the lead. The Colts are driving to try to go kick a game-winning field goal as time expires. Just have to settle for like a 60-yarder, miss it, and the Broncos do the roughing the snapper, right? You have to let the snapper be. You can't plow over the snapper. You can't make contact with the snapper, all that kind of stuff. Get a penalty, 15-yard penalty. Colts retry, win the game. Over. Good for the Colts. They've probably needed this. Been a rough stretch for the Indianapolis Colts, but my gosh, what a terrible way to lose the game. We'll come back to you, Evan Ingram. On the good side, a really impressive Colts start, not just because they won this game. They were outstanding in this game. I did not buy the Colts week 1 performance from an offensive perspective because of the Dolphins. And I still think that was reasonable. I think that was a reasonable approach to not expect a Daniel Jones-led Colts offense to all of a sudden be great because they beat up on the punching bag that is the Miami Dolphins. But this performance really, really changed things for me. They were outstanding. Daniel Jones was good. The offense shredded. And Daniel Jones was good, but the real story is that Jonathan Taylor dominated this football game. Jonathan Taylor is, if anyone, I would not bet on James Cook. I think right now, if I were to bet on someone to be the RB1, I think I might bet on Jonathan Taylor. He is a modern day workhorse. DJ Giddens basically does not play. DJ Giddens got to play in week 1 because the game got out of control, got out of hand. They were up 30 points in the third quarter. Jonathan Taylor got a little, he took a hit that kind of hurt, right? And they were like, yeah, just come. Let's not risk getting you hurt. And this is why they didn't risk getting him hurt. He's catching receiving touchdowns. He's 165 rushing yards, absolutely dominating the game. The only thing that would have me concerned about Jonathan Taylor from a fantasy perspective is that Daniel Jones, if they get to the 1 yard line, it's Daniel Jones QB sneaks. So that's the only thing holding him back. But Jonathan Taylor, a dominant start for the 2-0 Indianapolis Colts. The 1-1 Denver Broncos may be licking their wounds after that loss, but you know who isn't licking their wounds? Troy fucking Franklin. What an incredible game from Franklin. Truly target dominant. No, he had double the targets any other Denver Broncos pass catcher had in this game. He led them in snaps. The go-to player in this offense was J.K. Dobbins and Troy Franklin. I still sort of can't believe it, but as a Troy Franklin bull, as someone who loved him as a prospect, as someone who drafted him last season, and it went about as poorly as possible, this breakout is very exciting. I'm buying Troy Franklin. I believe in what's happening here. This is a little bit of a tougher matchup this week against the Chargers, but I'm buying the Troy Franklin breakout. What an incredible week 2 game from him. Tyler Warren just continues. Talked about this last week. Tyler Warren is legit. He's a top 5 fantasy tight end. I don't even think that's debatable. You should be starting Tyler Warren if you have him in all formats. He's a stud. Part of the reason why Troy Franklin went nuts and why I'm bullish on Troy Franklin was Courtland Sutton's route participation came down from a bad perspective. It's also bad because it went from basically 100%. He was largely 100% route participation player for the last year. He's the focal point of the passing offense, right? A target dominant player. This is why we drafted him, at the 4 or 5 turn or something to be the focal point of the passing game. He was not. Troy Franklin was. And not only that, but Pat Bryant got to play. And Pat Bryant getting to play came at the expense of Courtland Sutton and not of Troy Franklin, which was shocking to say the least. So I'm not saying that's sticky, but it's something to consider moving forward. RJ Harvey, nothing yet. There's been some big hits amongst rookie running backs. We talked about Scattaboo and Tuten and such, but RJ Harvey took a backseat to J.K. Dobbins, only played 19 of 59 snaps in this game. I thought J.K. Dobbins looked pretty good. So we'll probably, wheels up still in the short term for J.K. Dobbins shares, but RJ Harvey, we'll see. We'll wait and see approach on Harvey. Josh Downs, I talked a good clip last week about Josh Downs being pretty darn concerned about him, and he did not earn any targets last week. Didn't play very much last week. This week, 8 targets. So you look at the box score and you're like, oh, okay, see, all is well with Josh Downs. Not so fast, my friend. Shout out Lee Corso. The routes didn't come with it. He's still only playing in the slot. He's still only playing in 11 personnel. This team has not played a ton of 11 personnel so far, despite the fact that this game was kind of a shootout. I think he's going to earn targets when he's on the field because that's what Josh Downs does. But I think the volatility is going to be major from Josh Downs, and the league winning potential just really isn't there if he's only going to operate in this role that he has exclusively been in through 2 games. The ugly, I mentioned the Broncos stuff, but the real ugly is Evan Ingram. I truly think you can cut Evan Ingram in your home leagues. He's a rotational tight end who doesn't even really earn targets on a good but not awesome Denver Broncos offense. It sucks when a guy we spent probably some decent draft capital on doesn't do anything and ends up being a bust. But it's also, it sucks even worse if you hold on to a sunk cost and you keep trying to go back to that well. I just don't see the upside here that makes it worth holding on to this guy. I think it's just over. Last afternoon game, and it's a Super Bowl rematch. And it's the most boring game of the day. I don't even want to talk about it. The ugly, this game. I hate watching the Eagles. They're good. They're going to win a bunch of football games. They're going to make the playoffs. They might make the Super Bowl again. They might win the Super Bowl again. They are so boring to watch. And I do genuinely think the football perspective side of things, I get it. They're winning. They have a good recipe. They have a good defense. Saquon run game. Don't make any, don't turn the ball over on offense. I get it. I understand why they're doing what they're doing. But in 2 games, this passing offense with A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith has 246 total air yards in 2 games. Russell Wilson had 500 air yards this week, and he converted more than 60% of them. Right? That's insane. Russell Wilson converted more of his air yards in week 2 than the Eagles have attempted in 2 games. So why does this matter? From a real life football perspective, just to put my nerdy football bro hat on for a second, you open yourself up to losing games you shouldn't lose when you don't put the pedal to the metal and get a lead and pull away from teams. And that's what the Eagles have done. It worked out fine last year. I'm not sold that this roster is as good as last year's is, particularly on the defensive side. When they run into some of these other when they run into the Packers and they can't just bowl them over with Saquon Barkley, what's going to happen? Right? You got to be able to go score some points, and they're not doing it right now. And that's certainly a concern from a fantasy perspective. And the Chiefs are no better. The Chiefs are at least trying. I bet the Chiefs are boring and they lose. But the Chiefs are 0-2, and Xavier Worthy coming back could not happen at a better time. They do play the Giants this week, so hopefully that helps. They need to get Jalen Royals back. They need to get Rasheed back. They need to get some juice in this offense. And I do think they will be okay, but right now it's a tough look for the Kansas City Chiefs. Saquon did bounce back. Our guy, Tyquan Thornton, did catch a nice long touchdown. That was fun. That was very fun. Add him to the list of late round wide receivers that we drafted that did well. And I will say, Patrick Mahomes is still, I'm still comfortable with Patrick Mahomes in the short term because he's running like a goddamn madman. He's running so much that he's going to score fantasy points no matter how boring the Chiefs are. Speaking of boring, Sunday Night Football, Falcons, Vikings. I could barely keep my eyes open, and thankfully I did because I got to watch Tyler Algier score a touchdown. Shout out for the 0 running back bros. Tyler Algier getting to 15 fantasy points while Bijan is just dominating the football game. That dude is spectacular. The Falcons run game dominated this game. It wasn't particularly close. The Falcons defense, a takeaway, the good, of course, their defense has been outstanding. Last year, they were not a very good defense and one we particularly picked on with passing games. I'm not so sure that that's going to be the case this year. We'll see. 2 games against not the best opponents. I do still think there might be something here with the Falcons defense. I think there might not be something here on the bad side. The Vikings offense. Aaron Jones goes on injured reserve. The ugly JJ McCarthy is out for. I didn't mean the ugly JJ McCarthy. The ugly is the fact that JJ McCarthy is out for 2 weeks. Phrasing is important. JJ McCarthy out for 2 weeks. Aaron Jones on injured reserve. They struggled with those guys. I trust in KOC, but we're going to need to see something soon because this has been, they're lucky that they came back and beat the Bears in week 1. Jordan Mason wheels up, right? If there's a good, it's not good to Bennett. It's not good that Aaron Jones is hurt. None of this is good. There's not much good going on here from this game, but Jordan Mason, this is what you drafted him for, literally. The standalone value plus insane contingent value, and the contingent value is coming home already in week 3. If I'm worried about the Vikings offense, I think the Texans actually might be a bit of a 5-alarm fire here, starting with the ugly. And no, CJ Stroud is not ugly, like I accidentally phrased around JJ McCarthy. But I do think the Texans offense might just be broken. And I think when you continually put together the worst offensive line in football, when you have Nick Chubb, who, shout out Nick Chubb. He's one of the best pure rushers, like probably in the history of football. I think he was exceptionally fun to watch. But the days of that Nick Chubb are long gone. And you draft a couple of wide receivers and you don't play them. You play Xavier Hutchinson and you play Justin Watson. And you just pray to God that CJ Stroud and Nico Collins can make magic happen, right? They can turn chicken salad into chicken shit. And like, how are you expecting to win these games? The Texans have an awesome defense, and they have one of the best wide receivers in the NFL and an exciting young quarterback in CJ Stroud. And the coaching and the roster construction is just doing them an absolute disservice. Nick Chubb had 11 carries for 18 yards until he ripped off that late touchdown run, of which he was untouched. And I thought he summoned all of his powers to to get that touchdown run. If you have Nick Chubb on your teams, sure. But I'm not sure how many good games we're going to be getting really from anyone in this offense. It's a tough look. I'm hoping on the bad side of things that Jaden Higgins and Jalen Noel roles are really bad. Jaden Higgins a little bit better. Jalen Noel's essentially not playing on offense, and Christian Kirk is out, and I truly cannot understand what's going on with this Justin Watson and Xavier Hutchinson stuff. Just total non-factors as receivers, and maybe Higgins and Noel are not ready. But why not give them reps? Because those other guys aren't ready either. Justin Watson and Hutchinson are not ready for this moment either. So it's bad right now. I'm still hopeful. And maybe this is absolutely foolish, but I'm still hopeful moving forward, specifically for Higgins and Noel to get an opportunity. But maybe Christian Kirk comes back and ruins that, at least for Jalen Noel, who would likely operate in the slot. On the positive side, Bucky has a sneaky elite role. I know Rachaad White stole that goal line rushing touchdown. They kind of rewarded Rachaad with some good runs. But in week 1, Bucky was absolute workhorse, dominating snaps and touches in this backfield. Rachaad only stealing a handful of snaps and a handful of touches in week 1. And that mostly continued in week 2. A little bit more for Rachaad. He was kind of hilariously, Rachaad White was the hot hand for a short stretch in this game with the Bucs. But in terms of, again, shout out to our friend Ben Gretsch, from a signal or noise perspective, I would classify the Rachaad White stuff as mostly noise and the Bucky stuff as mostly signal, that this is his backfield. When Tristan Wirfs gets back, I think it's going to be a big deal for Bucky Irving, and better matchups. Better matchups are coming. That Falcons defense in week 1 and this Houston Texans defense in week 2, probably tougher matchup wise. Egbuka does score again. I put that in the good, but I also think it's at least, we should be honest, even though we're all excited. We're excited for the rookie. He got all the hype over the summer, and then he scores 3 touchdowns in 2 weeks. We are going to need a little bit more efficiency from him. I'm hopeful that it happens when Wirfs comes back, but Godwin's also going to come back. Egbuka's not earning a ton of targets, and he's been really buoyed by touchdowns thus far. And I don't want to put this out there because he's not this player. But this is sort of how the Jahan Dotson thing went in Washington. It was like we explained away a lack of efficiency and a lack of target earning by touchdowns. I don't think that's the case for Egbuka. I think he's much, much, much better than that. But that's just the vibe it's given off of. It's given off so far. And I think we should at least acknowledge it, even though I'm very excited for Egbuka moving forward. All right, game 16, Chargers, Raiders, late night Monday Night Football action. And the Raiders were pretty disappointing. Start with the ugly. Geno Smith, second lowest graded passer of the week, second lowest graded quarterback of the week behind Justin Fields, who was quite terrible. And, I'm still hopeful for the Raiders. I think this was mostly a Chargers matchup issue, but a tough game for the Raiders. On the bad side, the Chargers run game really, really struggled again. And in these backfields, Ashton Jeanty also ceded some work to Zamir White and to Dylan Laube. Aren't you worried about, the question would be, aren't you worried about Ashton Jeanty and Amari Hampton? I got on the old fantasy football subreddit and noticed everyone panicking about Amari Hampton. I think better days are ahead for Hampton, though I think it's understandable to be concerned. You hoped he would have come out of the gate hot. The Chargers, the fumble at the end, which of course got changed from Hampton to Herbert. I think some of this, Hampton has not been perfect, but I think some of the stuff that has been going on with Hampton from a lack of production perspective has been a little bit of Chargers-y. We'll see. But again, it's something to monitor with him. It's also very much something to monitor with Ashton Jeanty losing work. I think that this is silly. Zamir White in long down and distance over Ashton Jeanty seems bizarre. I think Jeanty still looks good, but some small systemic concerns and role concerns popping up for the superstar first-round pick out of Boise State. Also, bad side of things, Brock Bowers. It's a bad but good, but we'll see. Brock Bowers in week 1 didn't run that many routes, but he was hyper efficient. He acted like he played like the superstar that is Brock Bowers. But this week, he got the routes. He ran a bunch of routes. They dropped back to pass a bunch. However, there was no efficiency. He wasn't very productive on those routes. I think the real answer is probably somewhere in the middle. They are going to probably not run him on every single route. That's what they seem to show us that they want to do. Get Michael Mayer out there, not make Bowers be too much of a blocker, but I think the efficiency will bounce back and Brock Bowers will be just fine. On the flip side, Jakobi Meyers is drawing a bunch of targets. So if you have Jakobi Meyers, it hasn't been like awesome. It's been the pretty typical Jakobi Meyers experience, but the volume has been there. And I think they're going to pass a lot. And when Geno plays a little bit better, these double-digit targets from Jakobi Meyers are valuable, even if they're still kind of Jakobi Meyers double-digit targets. On the flip side, the Chargers still lead the league through 2 weeks in pass rate, PROE, for those who don't know, pass rate over expectation, meaning on downs where most teams would generally run, they're passing more often. And I think we see they might know that the run game is a little bit of a struggle. And that has manifested itself in Quentin Johnston having a monster first 2 games, 3 touchdowns, another long one in week 2, and Keenan Allen scoring again. I think Keenan is Keenan, right? Steady and going to provide a baseline level of expectation without maybe a monster ceiling. QJ may be the ceiling player. And I do still think while Ladd does not show up anywhere on this screen, better days ahead for Ladd McConkey. The role is totally fine. I think he's going to have a great season. And I'm not especially worried about Ladd McConkey. All right, week 2 is in the books. It's time to get on to week 3. Be on the lookout tomorrow here on the channel in your podcast feed for a week 3 DFS sports betting kind of game by game breakdown, similar to today, but for week 3 to get your DraftKings, FanDuel, managed leagues. We got survivor pools. We got all that kind of stuff coming for week 3. But before you guys go, if you could quickly hit the like button, hit subscribe. If you're on your podcast feed, you want to drop a comment on YouTube, you want to drop a comment, you have a question, you have disagreement, something, please feel free. Go ahead. Also, make sure you hop into the Discord in the description. Come hang out with us on game days. We're sweating out the games. We're talking strategy. We're talking start fits, everything, all week in the Spike Week Discord. And I will see you guys. I'll see you guys tomorrow, but I'll particularly see you guys in